So good morning from a sunny Cadwell Park. Yesterday we found out what these bikes were like on the road, we rated them, and now it's time to put them through their paces on the track. It's got me interested to see just how differently they perform out there on the circuit. Got high hopes for one or two of them, but tests like this, there are always surprises that come our way. We're going to go through the electronics, set the traction control on all the bikes to the most minimal of settings, the power to the highest, the tyre pressures are going to be set. We're also going to go through the suspension, set the sag, get the bikes in the best place they can be for a test like this. So that's the plan, time to get scrubbing. So as per the road test, we've got the same four rivals scrapping it out on track today. We've got MV Agusta's Brutale 800RR, KTM's 990 Duke, Triumph's Street Triple 765 RS, and Ducati's Streetfighter V2. So to help me out on this test, I've called in my mate, Joe Ackroyd. You would have never heard of him. He's a top rider, World Endurance, BSB, the roads, he's done it all. And today he gets to work with me.
We're here to audition together.
Okay, so yesterday the guys were out on the brand new S23s on the roads, and I think they were pretty impressed with it. So today we're at Cadwell Park, so I'm just going to drop the pressures down to 32 front and 30 rear, ready for the day's action on track. So also as well, the guys are wanting to use warmers, but with these particular tyres, you can use warmers providing you manage the situation properly in terms of temperatures, but to be honest with you, they're a road tyre, it's sunny, there's no need for warmers today, so it'll be interesting to see what the guys say.
Right, before we get into the bikes, I think we need to talk about the Bridgestone S23s that we've been on today. Cracking tyre. So it's new for 2024. It's been marketed by Bridgestone as a hyper sport tyre, an all-rounder. First time on it today, riding around here, and dead impressed, really. I'm really impressed. As a tyre that you can put on your bike that'll do the road mileage, it'll perform on a Sunday when you want to go out with your mates, but you can also ride on that tyre to the track, use it on the track day effectively, and it work as a track tyre, and then ride home again. I think they've done a cracking job.
Warmed up super quick, kind of knee down within the first lap. Good grip, yes, we were able to find the limits, but we were pushing on.
Yeah.
You know, a long day in the saddle on these tyres, and they still look mint. You know, if you want to get the most mileage out of your track day, these things seem to last forever. The funniest thing about today is we've been on some, I would almost say, you know, they're street bikes, kind of mid-capacity nakeds, and we've been scrapping out with some Pucker super sport bikes, you know, or litre bikes on slicks and all the rest of it, and yeah, those tyres have held their own, and so have the motorcycles, and I think we should get into talking about just how good those bikes are. So this is going to be quite interesting because we haven't actually discussed this, but I'm going to go in there and suggest, for me, the most challenging bike of the four on track today was the Ducati.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. Yeah, the Ducati was the first one that I rode, and I love Ducati as a brand. I love their bikes, but for me, it felt a little bit out of its depth today.
In what way? What was the thing that jumped out to you?
It felt heavy.
Yeah.
It felt heavy,
yeah,
and it felt long as well. It's actually, for me, was the most comfortable bike to be on.
Yeah.
I know Ducatis of old were perhaps not the most comfortable place to park your ass, but for me, I love what Ducati have done with ergonomics recently. You know, even the Panigale, I think, is a really roomy bike. So this was no different. I was comfortable on the bike. I think your positioning works well. I'm 6'2", and I'm comfortable on there.
Yeah.
But as a track bike, I just found that it was just a little bit heavy, a little bit, I don't want to say lardy because it's still quite an accurate bike,
yeah.
But you have to be very involved to make it do what you want it to do. I don't know if you found the same.
Yeah, I did. It's definitely the most physical of the pack. It feels also like through some of the slower stuff a little bit articulated in that you feel that front will start to want to turn in or whatever. It is just a long wheelbase, heavy bike when compared to the others on this test. You know, there are good qualities about it. It's got great brakes, and in terms of power, you know, that was something that opened my eyes. So we were out on track together at the same time. You were on the 765,
yeah.
And we were kind of coming on to start straight together, and it felt a little bit cheating actually on that Ducati in terms of actual pace. Punched out the corner well, kind of got in the slipstream and just cleared on past it, almost probably I'd say like getting on for 10 miles per hour quicker down the start straight here,
yeah.
Which is huge. You know, if you want a bike that's just quick, I would say that's the pick of the bunch in terms of terminal speed.
I like, you know, the electronics all work really well on it as well. You've got separate controlling units for the traction, for the ABS, for the quick shifter, for the anti-wheelie. It's all separate parameters, which I think you can make a more precise electronics package if you do that with them. And like I say, everything works really, really well on it. I love the engine, but for me as a track bike, it's not going to cut the mustard, especially when you put it against the other 3 bikes that we've had today.
Yeah, good bike, good ground clearance.
Yep.
Stable, hard handling. You have to kind of work at that bike, and I think that's why we've come to the decision we have, position number 4.
Yeah.
So this is where it gets quite interesting, because obviously we've got 3 more bikes left to go in this mix. So for me, deciding on the 3rd best bike is quite tricky. The reason being, there are 2 machines that are very different in delivering their potential, both enjoyable in different ways, but both easy to criticize in different areas as well. So I'm going to say those 2 machines are the KTM and the MV Agusta. And it's quite, I don't know how you feel about that, but it's quite hard for me to kind of cherry pick. If you said, pick one over the other, which one would you go for?
I agree with what you just said. For me, the bike that I would pick would be the KTM, out of the KTM and the MV.
What swings it?
I'll be honest with you, I know that KTM aren't really bothered about what we think is styling.
Yeah.
I think that thing is pig ugly. I'd put it at the top of the stairs to keep the kids in bed. But as a riding experience, I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's an absolute blast. Yeah. It's good fun. I don't think that it wins on track outright. For me, as a riding experience, I preferred riding it over the MV. I like what they've done with the chassis setup on it. It seems really, really accurate, and it surprised me because looking at it, I thought, I don't really see how this is going to work on a track. I expected the Ducati to be better. Yeah. So to get on the KTM and it ride the way it does, it's a little bit more involved. It feels like a mechanical bike, which I quite like. I sometimes think that manufacturers are that hell-bent on making everything super soft and smooth with electronics that it takes away a little bit of soul and a little bit of riding involvement. Whereas that KTM for me feels like you having to do everything yourself and get stuck in, but you've still got the safety parameters to look after you, things like traction, the quick shifter, all of that I think works really, really well. I thoroughly enjoyed riding that KTM. Yeah,
I agree with what you're saying. I think one of the best traits about it is the punch on that motor. You know, it's a typical big, twin. It wants to punch, and there's a good connection. When you turn that throttle, you feel it translate to that rear wheel in an instant. It's a very tangible riding experience, like you say. Surprised me, because in terms of ergonomics as well, it's probably the most sit-up of the 4 bikes here today. They're less kind of race-focused of them all. But yeah, it turned into corners nicely. It was relatively stable. I mean, I should probably add into that. I mean, we had quite a bit of fettling with the suspension on all the bikes today, trying to draw the best of them. They're all a little bit wallowy. They're all a little bit compromised in certain areas. And, the KTM was kind of no exception to that rule. It was not perfect. Maybe if we'd had a bit more time and all the rest of it, we could have dialed in a better setup. Like I say, there were a few wappy moments on the KTM. It was a little bit flighty, decent brakes, nice punchy motor. The worst thing about that bike for me was the gearbox. So I actually spoke to you about this before you went out, but I don't know how you found it, but these bikes are all new as well. And nowadays, when you're running an engine, quite often you're actually running in the gearbox. So in fairness to KTM, this is a new bike. It's only kind of just up to first service mileage. We've got it. We've just been ragging it around the track. But I found that 2 things. Going up the box, the shifter was that little bit delayed. The other bike seemed a little bit quicker going up with the shifter. And going down the box, it's going to sound very specific, but going 6th down to 3rd, for instance, that was okay. I could accept it wasn't the quickest down change and all the rest of it. Going 3rd down to 2nd was proper hard work. I felt like I was stamping on that lever. Quite often it meant I'd actually whip the clutch in, go down the selection, let go. What that happened to do when you went about it that way was it felt like you were locking the rear. Like down into Mansfield, for example, if you went down 3rd down into 2nd, which is what I was doing on that bike there, it felt like there was quite a bit of engine braking. You almost had to, again, control that bike and kind of get it get it kind of in line before you're then pitching into Mansfield, you know. I felt like I had to nurse it a little bit. I enjoyed the excitement of it, but I felt like I had to kind of rein it in a little bit.
I think that highlights the difference in riding styles, because I never experienced any of those problems.
Did you not?
I didn't, no, but my riding style, as we've seen on track today, is, you know, we ride differently, and we have different styles and different approaches to the corners. So for me, that wasn't, I never had that factor, even though you'd said it to me and I was then looking for it.
You didn't even have the down change. It's funny, isn't it?
But it's just...
Maybe you've got bigger feet.
I'm obviously a better rider than you, so I had a very different experience. I never experienced.
So where would you
the gearbox
criticise that
problems.
bike then? Where would you say it's maybe not as good as the best in this mix?
The engine's obviously doesn't feel like it's quite got the same performance as what we both agree is the probably the best bike that we tested today. The styling for me would for me personally would stop me buying it. You know, it's not my cup of tea to look at, which is a real shame because the rest of it I think is brilliant.
Yeah. I tell you what's interesting for me actually, just to throw this out there. I'm trying to do the maths in my head, I'm not very good at that, but 17 years ago, I did my first wild card at BSB on the 990 Duke, big V twin of old, and it was a big, heavy, cumbersome thing. An amazing event, like one of the most special races I've ever done here, and I really enjoyed it, but my God, when you compared that package of old to the 990 of now, that was one of the things when I was riding around today, I thought, how good have we got it? Because it's a great bike, isn't it? Like you say, great for tech, good stopping, good handling, nice character to the engine. No, you don't like the looks, but the actual package is decent. I think it just comes down to maybe, as you say, how you ride and what suits you. Maybe suited you and your style a little bit more than me. I've got finesse, you're just a brute.
I'll take that.
So I'm now confused. Are we saying that the MV is second best or joint second with the KTM?
I think that's the beauty of opinions and what we're doing here.
Yeah.
You know, the viewer of this or the buyer of these bikes are all going to fall in love with different things and prefer different things. So I don't think you and me do have to agree. For me personally, I would put the MV behind the KTM as a riding experience. I think it's a really pretty looking bike. To be honest with you, it was better than I thought it was going to be. And I really, really enjoyed riding it, but it felt a little bit soft. It felt, if I wanted to push as hard as what I pushed on the KTM or the Triumph, I definitely couldn't do that. And it wasn't anything other than the bike that was stopping that. I think it's got all the character that you'd expect from the Italians, and I don't think they've fallen short there, but I just think it's hard to put my finger on it because all the ingredients are there for that bike to be as good as the KTM, if not better. But it just didn't sort of all come together for me, really, as a riding experience.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I was, like you, pleasantly surprised. If I'm honest, when we got on track, even actually, you know, Johnny was working through the setups on the bikes, and it didn't matter how much tweaking he did to that. You know, he got the sag and everything set right, but, you know, turning away at the compression, and it literally did nothing on the forks. There was so much travel. It was like a bloody boat, wasn't it?
Yeah. Bobbing,
you know, front and rear. And I was dreading going out on track on that, if I'm honest. And the weirdest thing was, maybe kind of like in the first session out on it, it didn't translate in the way I was expecting it to. Yes, it was a little bit soft and supple and all the rest of it. But maybe, I think I was that blindsided by the engine. You know, we had like all the bikes, you know, we put them to the raciest of settings. That was in race mode, traction on level 1, and away you go. And it was nice and exciting. So much punch from that engine. I mean, like out of Charlie's exit, I was genuinely surprised. You know, when cracking on the throttle in third out of there, and he wanted to go again really quick, and you would hook fourth and just carry on the drive, and yeah, it actually seemed to peter off at the top versus that initial pickup, you know, around the upper mid-range, if you like. So the engine really impressed me. The sound from it was fantastic as well.
The soundtrack's amazing. It just makes you want to rev it constantly because of the noise of it, and the gearbox works really, really well. I mean, when you talk about that torque and drive, I was coming through the top of the gooseneck, and when you drive back on, heading down to Mansfield, the thing was wheeling.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of power there.
Yeah.
It feels like that power window is, like you say, it's a little bit further down the rev range. You kind of, it's quite easy to over rev it, and you're in there with nothing. So you need to use the torque of it. I found that when I started braking a little bit harder, because of the setup of it, we were finding that the rear's skipping about, which doesn't fill you with the most confidence. Again, we're on a hypersport tyre, not a slick where you can start trailing big handfuls of brake going into the corner. So that felt like a little bit of an issue. But yeah, I mean, the noise of it, the engine and the gearbox, MV have done a cracking job with that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that even kind of like in terms of back torque, it was so good at just absorbing whatever punishment you threw that gearbox as well. Like, you know, sixth, and when I say sixth, it was like limiter in sixth, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The gearing was mint for this track. Sixth down the back straight, down to second, it'd scream its head off, and then just turn in.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, fair play. And talking of turning in, I'm going to say this cautiously. I think it was probably the fastest turning bike in our test today, if not joint fastest. I mean, it definitely was much quicker turning than the KTM and the Ducati. Whether it was quite as agile as the Triumph, I don't know. What it definitely wasn't was as stable. I mean, we both said about this, coming through Hall bends, that kind of second left crest where you're a little bit on the throttle, because I think actually, in fairness, it's probably squat from the rear shock. That was too soft. That was squatting down. A lot of torque coming from that engine in that low mid-range section. And it would kind of almost want to lock the bike, you know, point you at the bloody barrier. You know, there were a few moments I had there and I thought, out of habit, you just drive that little bit. And there was no finesse there with that pickup or sufficient support through the suspension to just stomach that added little bit of oomph.
Yeah, I think,
you had to,
like you say, you know, some of that is probably setup related.
Yeah.
And I think maybe with a slightly stiffer rear spring, you would have been able to compensate for those issues that we've sort of felt today.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I think it is a good bike, and if you want an MV Agusta, you're not going to be disappointed with it. I wish I could have ridden them on the road as well to be able to have that comparison. Obviously, I've only ridden them here at Cadwell, but again, if I was going to a dealership with the money and it was the choice between the KTM or the MV, I'd buy the KTM.
Would you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a fair shout. I mean, like I say, there's lots to like about both of them, but I think the one thing we can agree on is the winner from today, the Triumph.
Yeah, outstanding. What can you say? They just keep delivering, don't they? Really?
Yeah.
They're doing, they just keep doing this with everything they produce. For me, it was accurate, precise where you put it. The gearbox works brilliantly on it. The engine pulls in such a wide rev range. You can be lazy if you want to, and it still pulls. The shift assist system, the quick shifter system that they put on all their bikes, you know, it's super smooth, isn't it? I think what I would say is, again, for a tall guy like me, I did notice when I got on it, you're in more of a racing track position straight away, having ridden then the Ducati and then getting in on the MV, which I guess from a styling point of view, you'd say the MV and the Triumph are fairly similar to each other. By that I mean they've both got that naked sports bike look, whereas the KTM's out there a little bit. The Ducati looks a little bit different to the rest. The difference between the MV and the Triumph with the ergonomics is massive. The MV, you feel like you're on a naked sit-up sports bike. When you get on that Triumph, you feel like, oh, I'm on something here that wants to go. And it translates onto the track, doesn't it? You get feedback and feel from the front, the rear.
It's almost like, I know this is probably quite harsh to say, but it's the truth. It feels like the Triumph is a refined MV. You know, we're talking about relatively short wheelbase machines, both of them. We're talking about triple cylinders. You know, they've actually got a similar characteristic in terms of how they drive out of corners and all the rest of it. It's just everything about the Triumph is that bit more polished. It's a lovely bike to ride. It just does what you'd hope it would do, you know, consistently, be it stopping, be it accelerating, turning, you know, and like you say, it's got that poise about it that just eggs you on to pushing it further and harder. And I think, yeah, I mean, you know, they last updated that last year, wasn't it? That was the last update, and it really is a very polished product now. I think Triumph are, you know, on top of their game. They're obviously benefiting hugely off of, you know, what they're learning in Moto2 as well. You know, they're no mugs, and they're producing a very capable, all-round, you know, street bike and track-capable bike in that 765 RS. It's just been great fun. It's been the bike that's put the biggest smile on my face all day. Yeah, you know, bloody belter. But on that note, anyway, I guess, you know, we are sure of our winner. Like I said, the Triumph has been a fantastic package all day. We've had a great test here, so, you know, without further ado, just to thank No Limits for having us, Cadwell Park for hosting us, the support from Bridgestone and R&G. So we've got loads more good stuff coming your way, so stay tuned.